Major General Gregg Martin, Bipolar General. Thanks to the Army, I got to go back to MIT and earn 2 master's degrees and a PhD, understanding bipolar disorder through the lens of Major General Gregg Martin. In this episode, I interviewed a distinguished military leader with a compelling story of resilience and advocacy. Our conversation delved into Gregg's journey with bipolar disorder, his mission to destigmatize mental health issues, and the lessons he has learned along the way. Gregg's mission and purpose. Gregg's mission is to share his bipolar story to help stop the stigma, promote recovery, and save lives. He emphasized that this has become his full-time occupation, and he finds great fulfillment in it. Here are key takeaways from the episode. Pursue continuous learning and balance professional responsibilities with academic pursuits. Recognize the symptoms of bipolar disorder and seek early intervention. Share your story and support mental health advocacy efforts. Prioritize self-care and consult healthcare professionals for medication management. Acknowledge the impact of trauma on mental health and support veteran mental health initiatives. Communicate openly and show empathy in rebuilding relationships affected by mental health issues. By implementing these insights and recommendations, we can contribute to a more informed and supportive community for those affected by bipolar disorder and other mental health challenges. Understanding bipolar disorder. Gregg provided a comprehensive explanation of bipolar disorder, a mood disorder that affects the brain. It causes individuals to experience periods of mania and depression. Managing bipolar disorder. Gregg highlighted the importance of lifestyle changes in managing bipolar disorder. He mentioned that getting enough sleep and not taking the job too seriously could have slowed down the progression of his condition. The role of medication. Gregg shared his positive experience with lithium, a medication that stabilizes brain chemistry and alleviated his symptoms of depression. The impact of military service on mental health and the triggering event. Gregg recounted the pivotal event during his service in Iraq in 2003, which he believed triggered his bipolar disorder. The combination of pressure, thrill, euphoria, and stress during this period activated his bipolar gene. The prevalence of mental health issues among veterans. The conversation also touched on the high prevalence of bipolar disorder and other mental health issues among veterans. Gregg noted that while 3 to 4% of the general population has bipolar disorder, the rate is significantly higher among veterans. Rebuilding relationships. Gregg shared how he rebuilt his relationship with his spouse after going through a difficult period of mental health challenges. He emphasized the importance of communication, empathy, and mutual support in rebuilding their relationship. This episode offers valuable insights into the complexities of bipolar disorder, the importance of mental health advocacy, and the impact of military service on mental health. Gregg's story is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of seeking help and supporting others. Whether you're a military veteran, a mental health advocate, or someone seeking to understand more about bipolar disorder, Gregg's story provides valuable lessons and inspiration. You can find Gregg at generalgregmartin.com, that's Gregg with 2 G's, and his book, www.generalgregmartin.com. Thanks for watching.
I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from hownottodie.com.au. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by these guys, mystate.com, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients, it provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient, gut-friendly capsule. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest this morning, all the way from the United States, Major General Gregg Martin. Gregg, great to see you.
Thanks, Damien. It's wonderful to be on with you.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and you're my second Sir. I had Sir Steve Hansen on just the other week. He was knighted. He was a former All Blacks rugby coach, and that was great. And of course, he's just call me Steve. But Major General, we were just talking off camera there about my Army career, and I was saying how small our unit was and how small our country is. Um, our highest ranking officer there is a Lieutenant General, and this is now getting into military speak for the listeners, but I think it goes Lieutenant General, General, then Major General. So that's quite a high rank that you had there, Greg.
Oh, and yeah, please call me Greg. So in the U.S. Army, the after colonel comes brigadier general, 1 star, major general, 2 stars, lieutenant general, 3 stars, and then general, 4 stars.
Oh wow, yeah, it's a very different sort of progression, and over there. Ours is our unit was run by a lieutenant colonel. He was the CO of the New Zealand SAS, and then you go up to a full colonel for other ranks, which were way above my pay grade, and I wasn't involved in there. But the one that intrigues me, and maybe intrigues the other the listeners and the viewers, is you also got PhD next to your name.
Yes, thanks to the Army, which is really big on higher education for its officers. I got to go back on, while on active duty, go back to MIT to go to grad school. And the Army mission was for me to get 1 master's degree in engineering. And during the time they gave me, I got 2 masters and a PhD, which, when we get into the bipolar story, that is symptomatic of a bipolar brain. I mean, that is not normal human behavior to be able to perform at that level. So, yes, I am a PhD thanks to the Army
Wow,
and my
congratulations.
and my and my bipolar brain.
Which is brilliant. We're going to dive into that because I love that you celebrated that. Then that was a quite telling. You're celebrating that bipolar brain that got you 2 masters and a PhD. It's intriguing the different humans out there, and I remember specifically Dutch Moyer. He was a Delta Force Sergeant Major. Um, and he was asking me, I did a great interview with him, and then at the end he was asking me about sleep because he sees some of the things I teach with sleep, stress, and nutrition. And he was saying, you say you need 7.5, 8 hours sleep a night for a majority of humans. He's like, what about these guys like Trump and Musk that only sleep 4 hours? And I said, well, their their DNA is a little bit different. 5% of the human race only needs that amount of sleep to recover. So the BPD, the bipolar, is not a lot of the human population. What sort of percentage of the population is does that occur in?
About between 3 and 4% of the human population has bipolar disorder. Interestingly, though, I read a study by the National Institute of Mental Health that said 25% of US veterans have bipolar disorder. And we can unpack that and peel back the onion during the interview, but that is absolutely mind-blowing on one hand. But on the other hand, when you really understand the nature of bipolar disorder and how it overlaps and intersects with the nature of military service, it's really not surprising at all.
That's a very intriguing statistic. And I even asked that question in the right way for this show. I said, does what percentage of the population does this occur in? I didn't use the word afflict because there's a lot of good things that come out of this. Your book and all the great work you did. So it gives us a great stepping off point. What is bipolar disorder? And only because that's what it's named. But what does it mean to be bipolar in a human?
So the medical community has an overall category of conditions they call mood disorders that affect the human mood. And specifically, bipolar disorder, you could also call it bipolar illness or
Mm,
bipolar disease because it's literally an illness of the brain. And what I mean by that is a bipolar brain decides on its own, regardless of what the person wants, it decides, I want to go into mania. And so what it does is it starts to produce and distribute excessive amounts of powerful natural chemicals like dopamine, endorphins, and others, and it distributes them into the brain, which then drives the person into either a hypomanic state or a manic state. And hypomanic just means it's below the level of actual mania. And what mania consists of is high energy, don't need much sleep, super enthusiasm, grandiosity, religiosity, recklessness, you know, continuous flow of new ideas, nonstop talking, very irresponsible. Those are just some of the things that go with mania. And then with bipolar disorder, the brain then decides, well, I've been manic long enough. Let's try some depression. And it just on its own underproduces and underdistributes those same chemicals, which then drives the person into depression, which means low energy, disinterested in everything, isolated, confused, indecisive, hopelessness. And so it swings between mania and depression, with also some stability in between. There are periods where the brain and the mind work just fine with neither mania nor depression. In my case, I had mostly mania, which, if you're going to have anything, it might as well be mania, even though it is, deadly consequential. I mean, mania can kill you, but it was mostly fun and enjoyable, and I felt like Superman and the smartest person in the world, and did amazing work for the Army. That's why I got promoted up to 2-star level, until it went too high, and then it brought me crashing down and nearly killed me.
Wow. I'm going to unpack that a little bit, but to give the listeners context as to why I was so excited to have you on the show, you very succinctly said to me just before we started about your mission. So what's your mission and purpose now, please?
So for the past several years, I had to, after I came out of bipolar hell 8 years ago, I mean, I was in the pits. I mean, just wanted to die, completely hopeless, terrifying psychosis. Once I got on the right medication, principally lithium, it stabilized my brain chemistry and I started to recover. And the symptoms of bipolar disorder, they basically vanished within a few days. But then I had to rebuild my life. Because, I mean, physically, I was a wreck. I had lost like 20, 25 pounds of muscle. I could barely do a push-up. I couldn't do a pull-up. I could hardly, walk for any distance, because the depression had just sucked the life out of me. So I had to rebuild my life, mind, body, spirit. And the first thing I started thinking about is, I need a mission statement. Just one of the great things in the military is you're given your mission and your mission statement, and you just carry it out. So it took me a little while to figure it out, but I said, I went through this horrendous experience with bipolar disorder. I need to share this story with the world to help people. And it came to me, here's my mission statement. I'm looking at it right in the face. It's to tell my story. So my mission is sharing my bipolar story to help stop the stigma, promote recovery, and save lives. And I do it through writing, speaking, and conferring with people. And it's really my full-time occupation now. And I absolutely love it.
Thank you very much for stating that twice to me and once on the recording. It's very succinct and very clear, which is super helpful for a crayon guy like me. What's really intriguing for me, Greg, is a lot of people know about depression. A lot of people know about PTSD and stress and all these things. And depression, I just came to the realization the other day that it's just a depressed state of chemicals in your brain causing something. That's not it. It's just a state. It's a strange word that we use, or adjective to use. But not a lot of people know about bipolar. I think it's very unreported and uneducated around it. And then speaking about what you said, being in that hell, 8 years ago, and that right down there, you can't even move. You've got no will to live at all. Pretty stunning. But on the education side, again, you said you did so well in the military, you're so successful, and that's what got me intrigued about you. You were literally so productive. I'm going to come to a question soon, so just painting the picture more for the listeners. The only thing I knew about bipolar was, I'm showing my age here as well, is a movie with Richard Gere called Mr. Smith. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a really interesting movie. And he had those manic and depressive episodes, and there was a woman who loved him, and so on. Great story. And then there's you. Literally the only two people that are publicly speaking about this. So, military. What did this allow you to do? What was this so allowed you to be so successful at what you were producing?
Well, starting as far back as I can remember, but certainly in high school in the 1970s, my condition gave me excess energy, drive, enthusiasm, problem solving skills, creativity, positivity, optimism, all of those qualities that the military just loves. So in high school, I was sort of the all-star athlete, one of the top students, the best leader. And then I carried that with me to West Point. And meanwhile, I'm moving slowly, unknown to me. I didn't know this until a couple years ago, but unbeknownst to me, I was moving up the bipolar spectrum. So I was moving closer and closer to actual bipolar disorder. So by the time I went to West Point, I was higher on the spectrum and I had more energy and intensity. Then I went out into the Army as a lieutenant and a captain and all the different ranks up through battalion and brigade command. And those qualities, my energy, enthusiasm, drive, my ability to solve complex problems with creative solutions, they just kept going up, up, up. So I kept getting, all the promotions, getting selected for all the schools. I mean, nothing but success, top ratings, and, all the way to two-star general. And so that's what this bipolar brain in living on the bipolar spectrum, which I kept moving up consistently, that's what it did for me.
Thank you very much. Again, super succinct. Then, looking back, what would be, because I know what your mission is now, what would be a solution to not go off the rails? I think that's the easiest way to say it, but still really succeed. You wouldn't have got to where you are now without having to go through those things, but what would be a solution looking back that you could give to someone that was in your position now at lieutenant?
So when I was a young officer, in my 20s, my mother told me, she counseled me and said, you need to change your ways. You are drinking and partying too much.
Wow.
It's going to really it's going to really hurt you. Number two, you're not getting enough sleep. You're only getting 3-4 hours of sleep a night. You need to get 8 hours of sleep. And then finally, she said, you take your job with the Army way too seriously. You're so intense and focused on the Army. And if you died tomorrow, the Army would do a nice funeral and then they would forget about you. Somebody else would go in the job and do just as well. So that was her advice to me. And I think if I had followed her advice and really taken that to heart, those three principles, I could have really slowed down my acceleration up that bipolar spectrum. I think I could have slowed it down significantly. That's number one. And that would have been a lifestyle change. Number two, as I started to display over the years more and more intense manic behavior, if people had known what they were seeing, and if they had been educated and trained in what are the basics of these mental illnesses, and in my case, bipolar disorder, people could have observed and figured out that I was manic, and that they could have helped me to get in and see, get help, maybe see a doctor. But that's really hard to do. People, A, they don't know what it is. B, it's hard to tell somebody, hey, go get help. Because if you're like me in a state of, manic like state, you think everything's great because you feel so good. You don't think anything's wrong. So you don't believe them. You think that they're your enemy, which I did if people did talk to me. But if all of these things came together and you were to go in earlier and get professional medical help, and if they were able to diagnose you properly, which is hard, bipolar is tough to diagnose, and they prescribe effective medication, which is also hard, it often takes years to get the right meds. But if they did all of that and they put you on some medication, it could have stabilized me and prevented the disaster that came later. But that's a lot of ifs and a lot of dots that have to be connected. And one of the things right now, the ethics in psychiatry is that until someone really shows that they have bipolar disorder, they won't prescribe medication or try to diagnose them, because it's very difficult. Like in my condition, what's the difference between like early stages of bipolar disorder and just having an exuberant personality? I mean, it's very hard to tell, and psychiatrists don't want to make that call until you go over the edge and are unquestionably bipolar.
That's tricky, dangerous. There's a lot of things I can unpack there. Yeah, that is not a good place to be, and tough on the medical community because they're trying to do the best for you as well. One thing that stood out to me in your answer there, Greg, was the medication. And it's just questions going through my head. Definitely, I can understand how the medication will level you out. That's not the words you said. But coming down from the mania, I've got that part. What about those lows of depression as well? Does it help with that? Or yeah, I think I'll answer that question there. Does it help with the lows as well?
Yes, it definitely does. And I'll give you my personal example. So after, years and years of mostly mania and manic behavior, I then, after I got fired from my two-star command, forced to retire, and then later hospitalized, I spiraled, then crashed into horrendous depression, hopeless, crippling, depression with terrifying psychosis, which are hallucinations and delusions. Um, and so that it was at that point in November of 2014 that I got diagnosed properly with bipolar disorder type 1. But then that was only the beginning, because I went from bad to worse. The medications they prescribed for the first year or so did nothing for me. They basically just made me sleepy and want to go to bed, until they prescribed lithium, which is a natural salt from the earth. And what the lithium did, once they prescribed it, within about 3 or 4 days, my symptoms vanished. So I had been hopelessly depressed, and the depression went away. Suddenly I came, out of the pit of, near death. And suddenly I had energy, interest, drive. I was fun to be around. I wanted to talk to people, be with people. I was very weak physically because of what the depression, the toll it had taken, but I was up and moving and wanted to do things and have fun. I came back to life, and that's what that medication did. And what lithium does, and I can't speak for all of them, but it gets inside the cells of the brain and the wiring of the brain. And it essentially, and this is, using for me, the crayon terms, it sets a ceiling so that when the brain, because I still have a bipolar brain, my bipolar disorder hasn't gone away. It's with me till death. So when it decides I want to go into mania, the lithium constructs a roof or ceiling. And so it can't go past it. It bumps into the ceiling, and the lithium won't let it go into mania.
Yep.
And then on the other hand, it puts a floor down so that when it wants to go into depression, it hits the floor and you stay in this kind of steady state. Now, that doesn't mean it's foolproof, because there are triggering events that can trigger you to either go back up into mania or down into depression. And a big part of managing bipolar disorder, which is a chronic disease, is understanding and knowing what the triggers are and taking counteractive measures to, not go there and not get trapped. It's like, in the military, if you look for minefields, because you don't want to go in one. So when you find a minefield, you put a fence around it and warn everybody, don't go in that minefield or you get blown up. And that's how I have to treat these triggers, which are different situations, different subjects, sometimes different people. And I have to be really vigilant to keep myself in that healthy zone.
Wow, what a great analogy, the minefield. So again, you're really opening up my bandwidth on understanding of BPD, and I'm sure the listeners, because you spoke about not only a chemical imbalance, you're talking physiological, if we're going to use a fancy word, but also a psychological aspect, and using that minefield analogy. That's a brilliant analogy for other mental health hurdles, I think is the easiest way to say it, because a minefield's not a disease. It's just something it's a hurdle to evade and go around. And I was just listening to Tom Satterley the other day, another Delta guy from the All Secure Foundation. Um, Him and his wife were on the show, and great. He would talk about actually Jen was talking about, his wife was talking about the craziest, the simplest thing would just send him off, and he'd be tapping a 45 on his head, and it'd be just from somebody saying something, him seeing something lying around. But if we, as veterans, had the idea that's a minefield, identify that, see that, and just go around it, we could probably pull ourselves back a bit. That's a really clever analogy for people like us to consider the psychological side of things, Greg.
Good. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. One of the things having gone through, years, decades of living with bipolar disorder, and then writing the book and these articles and doing research and talking to lots of, real experts, I've learned a lot. And then, I sort of translated into my own, military mind, things that make sense to me.
Yeah, this is amazing, and you actually nailed the next question or angle we're going to go down. You're a two-star general, and you were literally medicated. I think you said a year it didn't work. I'm just imagining back in World War One, World War Two, a decorated general, a hero, or whatever they wanted to call them back then, because they'd done great in battle, and then shell shocked, and they're gone for life. They're in the loony bin. Let's just use the old words. They're a basket case, which was intriguing, knowing where that word came from basket weaving, and as some form of creative therapy. But that's what would have happened in the old days. You literally sent off the loony bin. The medications work or don't work. Say they didn't work, but you weren't there. You're the success, using your experiences, both great and terrible, to educate others. So it's quite an interesting position you're in compared to the past, isn't it?
It really is. And that's I think a testament to the improvement in medicine. I mean, modern medicine is really amazing what it can do. And I think that also sort of culturally, sociologically, our societies have advanced quite a bit, not worldwide. I mean, but I would say in, the Western countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States, a lot of Europe. I mean, the whole understanding and treatment of people with mental health disorders and brain disorders has really gotten way, way, way better. Now, it's not there yet. We have a long way to go. But in many other parts of the world, I mean, they still think a mental illness is evil spirits flying around inside the brain.
Wow.
That it's like it's voodoo, that it's witchcraft, and things like that. So I think using your example of World War One, to now, a century later, it's incredible the improvements. And even I would say just in the US military, if you go back to pre 9/11, we were still kicking people out of the military who had PTSD, depression, any kind of medication for their mind or their brain. And that has changed tremendously. Now the military, it assesses each person individually. It talks to the psychiatrist. It does everything it can to accommodate the person and keep them serving. But in some cases, they have to separate people from the service. Like in my case, I was forced to retire, but if I hadn't been eligible for retirement, I would have been medically retired out of the Army, because with my level of bipolar disorder, it's just considered too dangerous.
Yeah, I totally understand. And what you're saying there about the regular military in the old days, which 2000 pre 9/11 doesn't seem old to us, but some of the people it might be. Jason Fox, SBS operator, he's going to be on the show in our last half of 2024. He was literally that. He went through a PTSD, depression, and as soon as he saw this, as soon as he saw the psych, for the UK military, boom, he was just on that fast track out of there. Completely different now. But let's talk about your event, because that really blew my mind. Your event that led up to that really high mania. Someone saw that and said, "Hey, this can't happen." What are you open to talk about that event for people, or are you okay to speak to that?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And it's described in real detail in the book as well. But so remember, I was on this bipolar spectrum, and I was going higher and higher and higher, so that by the time I was in my early 40s, I was almost at the level of an onset of bipolar disorder. I was getting crazier, more wild, more out there, more reckless, but I didn't have bipolar disorder yet. I was sort of pre-bipolar. But the Veterans Affairs and the Department of the Army conducted two independent investigations about me, and their question was, how did General Martin come down with bipolar disorder at such a late age? And what happened to this guy, this high
Right.
performer? And so they both came down to the conclusion that the triggering event for me was when I was a brigade commander in the Iraq War in 2003. So I was a key commander in charge of, thousands of troops. We did all the engineer, sapper stuff, all over the battlefield. And they said that it was the combination of the pressure, the thrill, the euphoria, the stress, all of that wrapped together, that it triggered in my brain my bipolar gene, and that was the actual start of official bipolar disorder. And so what happened was, I remember when we attacked from Kuwait into Iraq, in Fifth Corps, which was the main force, the main effort, 100,000 troops, and the engineers were literally out in front for much of the attack, clearing stuff and all the rest. But I felt like Superman when we attacked. I felt unbelievably great. I was so happy. I was thrilled, euphoric. And then I started just moving all over the battlefield, checking on the troops, checking on the missions, making decisions. Life and death decisions were routine. We were under fire, much of the time. I was able to, my mind was so sharp, I could look at the battlefield and anticipate and come up with creative solutions to complex problems before anybody else even knew there was a problem. We'd already have it figured out, solved, and we're moving on to the next mission. And so I didn't need sleep. My energy levels were amazing. I had incredible endurance, and pretty much all over the battlefield for that year in Iraq. And I would say I was manic 99% of the time. I did have occasional dips into depression, but they were very short, like, just a couple of hours, maybe a day. And during those periods, I would be withdrawn, confused. My brain would be foggy. I'd be indecisive, but I was able to bounce right back out of it, thankfully. So that was the start. And that was in 2003. But then over the next 11 years, I went into higher and higher levels of mania and deeper depressions. And all of this was unknown, unrecognized, undiagnosed. And then by 2014, my mania got so strong, the doctors explained it. It was like rocketing into space, and then the rocket exploded. And I literally went into a state of madness, insanity. And I can give you examples, but I was literally crazy. And people then, they didn't know that it was bipolar disorder, but my subordinates started to see there's something really wrong with this guy. And they started writing anonymous reports to my boss, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so he got all these letters coming in from students, faculty, staff of the National Defense University. So he did a big investigation and assessment to treat me fairly and find out what was going on. And plus, he knew me very well. And so at that point, I was in full-blown mania. And that led to, well, I got called into the report to the chairman at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. And so I went to his office at the Pentagon, and I didn't know if I was going to get promoted, fired. I had no idea. But I report, and he comes across the room and he gives me a great big hug. He said, "Greg, I love you like a brother. You've done an unbelievable job. I give you a grade of A+. But your time at National Defense University is over. You have until 5 p.m. today to resign, or I will fire you. And I'm giving you an order to go get a psychiatric evaluation this week at Walter Reed Military Hospital." And you would think I would be disappointed, heartbroken, crushed. Not at all. I was so manic. I said, "Thank you, Chairman. This is great news, because God put me here to do important things. And now he's going to put me somewhere else to do even more important things." And the irony is, 10 years after that, which was 2014 to now 2024, I was actually right, because this bipolar mission is the most important thing I've ever done.
It really is. Wow, you've got such a magnetic personality. It must have been amazing to be under you and having you as a leader. Gosh, I want to touch on something you said there about going into Iraq in 2003. When you were saying, that was the trigger, I literally had the question, Greg, again, logical / crayon guy, was it nature or nurture? Now we know there's a nature part, literally the bipolar gene, so the engineering side of us will say that occurred. But devil's advocate, was it not a requirement physiologically and human-wise for you to be able to have those chemicals in your brain, to be able to do that job, wheeling and dealing all those chess pieces at one time? Nature or nurture? Throwing that out there.
I think I needed that in order to perform this very complex, important, and dangerous mission. And so I think I was nurtured to be a good, smart, reliable combat leader. I mean, our militaries do a good job at doing that, for, sort of nurturing you to do the job. But I think it was the nature of my brain that elevated me and gave me that extra boost and enhanced my performance. And I would say that in my entire career, hands down, my best assignment, the one I did the best, performed the best, was recognized by my higher headquarters, 3- and 4-star generals, that they thought I did the best, was that year of brigade command in Iraq. I mean, I was really, kind of a human version of Superman. And it was just thrilling. It was absolutely amazing.
That brings me back to the circle where you wanted to elaborate on, 3 to 4% of the human population has BPD, but 25% of veterans. So this is a stepping point for that. Again, my question was, I think in my mind so far, opinion-wise, it's only an uneducated opinion, I think that was a requirement for you to do such a high-performing job. But this 25% of veterans that are experiencing BPD, can you talk about that, what you've seen and learned in your journey?
Yes. And I'll start it with, in the inside cover of my book, I've got a bunch of endorsements from people. One of them was the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command. So Delta Force, SEALs, Rangers, Green Berets, and all that. And he said, and it's in the front cover of the book, he says, bipolar disorder is one of the signature injuries of the post 9/11 wars. And I asked him, "I've never heard that. What are you talking about? What do you mean?" And he said, tremendous numbers of special operators come down with bipolar disorder. And a lot of it is because of the genes, the nature that they already have in their brains. But then it's the jobs that they do, these intense jobs that are so dangerous and require so much courage and willpower to do it, that they tend to get triggered into bipolar disorder at a higher rate. And so, according to him, his name is Joe Votel, 4-star, that in the special ops community, bipolar disorder is a signature injury, meaning it's quite a bit higher than anywhere else. But the big picture is this: I was a late onset of bipolar disorder. I came down with it in my 40s. The typical age for onset is between 18 and 25.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the exact same years, 18 to 25, that most people join the military. So you have kind of an overlap there. The second thing is, what kind of people join the military, and what kind of people does the military want? Well, they want people with energy, drive, enthusiasm, creative minds, problem-solving skills. Well, lots of those people they're probably on the bipolar spectrum, and they're coming into the military without knowing that they're already on the spectrum and they already have a bipolar brain. So then they show up in the military, they're at the right age, they have the right predisposition for bipolar. And then the first thing that happens, we put them under stress, pressure, which is a triggering event. And then the next thing is, once they make it through all that stressful training, we deploy them to war, and now they're in combat. And so when you add all of that together over a period of years and decades, it really should be no surprise if we have 25% of veterans with bipolar disorder.
It's really interesting, that flicking the switch, and that's so true. I mean, same with cancer and so on. I remember my neighbor, 83 years old, he would smoke and drink and all these things, but he just never flicked that switch of the gene. Same thing with those normal percentage of the population versus the veterans. Finding them, and then, like you say, putting them under stress, you're just cooking that into them and making it explode there.
Yes, exactly.
Can I go back to the minefield analogy? Only a little bit for me, and maybe for someone else. I really think of the listeners as I do a show, and I used to listen to podcasts, and I was like, oh, what did that person say? I'm going back and writing it down. When you identify the minefield, could you just talk us around, because you obviously figured this out or had some help with it. What's your strategies of that minefield of that's going to be a trigger? I need to grip this up. What does Greg do when he sees that or knows is going down the wrong road?
So I've learned through trial and error and through experience, and also talking to my therapist, which is really, really helpful, and to my wife Maggie. We've talked about, well, why do I get agitated? What's making me angry? What's going on here? Well, it's certain subjects. It's certain subjects that people talk about, and for one reason or another, based on my experience, wartime experience, what have you, it agitates me. It makes me mad. It makes me angry. So I know that these subjects could have the potential to agitate me, which is dangerous. That's a bad place to be when you have bipolar disorder, because it can blip up into mania, only an angry, mean, full of rage kind of mania. And so I don't talk about it. And if people are talking about these subjects, I basically walk away and just kind of get away from it and don't go there, which can be kind of odd, because to just not talk about a subject or to get up and walk away. But I've tried to tell my family and friends that these topics really agitate me. And then there's the other thing. There's certain people, and this is terrible. I never had this problem before my bipolar disorder got severe. I was super easygoing. Nothing bothered me. Nothing riled me. I could deal with anybody, just get along with them. But now that I've got this strong bipolar in my brain, there's certain people, they just piss me off and they agitate me and they make me angry. And so I largely try to stay away from or ignore or kind of fence myself off from them, which can be uncomfortable and bad. Like if I'm in fact, I've got a situation now. I mean, if I've got a group of friends and there's people in that group of friends who are friends with everybody else, but I don't care for them or they agitate me, that's a little uncomfortable. And I try to do my best, even to fake it and so as not to be a curmudgeon or somebody that people don't want to hang around with. The other side of the coin is what puts me into a happy mania. And a couple of years ago, a really good friend of mine who loves to throw fun parties, she had a dancing party, karaoke, lots of beer, good food, fun people. And so I went, and immediately I went back to my partying days. I mean, I'm like knocking down beers, dancing like a wild man, singing karaoke. And I felt myself going up, 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 up. And I went into some level of mania. And Maggie could see that I was going manic. And so we talked about it. And so I really try to tone down, dial back, curb back on the partying, on drinking alcohol, on things like that. And then the other side is there are triggers that can drive me into depression. And I think one of them is, although it's going towards mania at the beginning to have this agitation, the agitation and the anger can move me into a depressed state.
Yes.
And so
yes.
I know I've got to be really careful with the anger a bit. The other thing with depression is lack of sleep. It can really move me down into a depressed place. So those are the main ones.
Greg, I want to say thank you, and thank you for being so open for the whole time you spoke. And it doesn't happen with ranking military officers, even not ranking, even the lieutenants. They don't want to show their and this is definitely air quotes, weaknesses. But you've been so open with it, and then literally your own experiences. You were speaking about your. I mean, it was you talk about that with a therapist. So I really want to celebrate that with you. And I can relate so much. I'm sure the other veterans and so on can. The anger tips over to depression so much. So that really helped me out with the minefield to avoid, and it's being able to identify it first up. Purpose and identity. I didn't. This is not a military podcast. It's a Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, and you've literally talked about those exact subjects. Your physiological state out of depression, the mind, obviously, and we're very straight in the talking. But a lot of the veterans I have, and even the athletes, I actually think this is intriguing. Maybe for you, sorry. The athletes find it the hardest. An Olympic athlete who one day wins the gold and the next day retires, the losing purpose and identity. I'm quite intrigued for your transition out of the military. It was literally in one day after the hug. I'm thinking that you've got that with your mission statement, but how did you regain your purpose and identity coming out of the military to where you're in such a successful and functional place now?
Well, it took a while. It didn't happen quickly because remember, after I got fired in July of 2014, I then went into terrible depression, and then I was diagnosed properly after 6 misdiagnoses. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1 in November of 2014. And then I spent 2 years in bipolar hell until I came out of it with lithium. And that was in August of 2016. So then we moved to Florida, and I started getting my legs under me again, started, working out, started trying to rebuild my marriage, started to try to, what am I going to do with my life now? What am I going to do to occupy my time and to have a meaningful life after having such a meaningful, uplifting life as an Army leader? What am I going to do? And so I got really into religion for a while and went to multiple churches and Bible studies and, prayer breakfasts and things like that, and met some wonderful people. And it helped me a lot. The spiritual strengthening was really good. And I started getting back into, really good workouts, healthy eating, trying to meet people and all of that. But it just struck me that the thing I can do that will do the most good in the world would be if I am totally honest and open about my bipolar condition. If I tell it like it is and explain to people in a book, in articles, in talks, that can make a difference, because I've got this unique status as, an Army general, plus, qualified as an airborne ranger, engineer, sapper, and all that good stuff. So I've got all this stuff going for me that people will listen and pay attention and give me a platform. And mental health is just, it's such a terrible tragedy, because if you have mental illness and you don't get help, you're looking at a life where your marriage, your family, your career will probably be destroyed, your finances destroyed, good chance of addictions, homelessness, prison, violence, and death. That's what you're facing. And the main reason people don't go get help is because of the stigma, which is based on fear and ignorance. And so I want to show everybody, hey, I'm not afraid of this. I own my bipolar disorder. It's mine. And, I didn't want it, but it wanted me. And so I'm owning it. And I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. I'm not stigmatized. I'm going to tell everybody and help as many people as I can. So that was my transition. And, I suddenly got that awakening, and then just got busy writing and speaking and all that kind of thing. But it did take a while. It was funny though, when I was inpatient at the VA hospital, I'm in a locked up ward with, a bunch of mentally ill veterans. And, in one of the first meetings, I told my therapist, I said, I'm going to write a book. And this was in 2016. And she said, hey, Greg, look around. You're in a locked up psych ward. I think that might have to wait a little bit. And I said, okay, after I get out of here, I'm going to do it. And she said, well, if you really want to do it and you think it makes you feel better, then have at it. Go for it. And I didn't actually write it. I didn't start writing it for about another 3 or 4 years, because I just wasn't ready. My mind wasn't there. But once I did, it was very cathartic, therapeutic. It helped me a lot, and I learned a lot.
Wow. So much to unpack again. Thank you. Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of veterans, and interviewed a lot of people that have been through some dark places, and I've never had someone so open as yourself. And I love that you said it didn't happen overnight for your transition. And that's what everybody says. It's like the overnight success, but they've been working their ass off for 10 years. Same thing. We see these veterans, and they're in great places, and it literally took them that amount of time. Gosh, and you were so blunt and so real about what you can spiral down to with mental illness. And some people need that. Some people need to hear that. They don't want to have the arm around them. They need to know the straight talk of, this is where you will go if you continue down that road. And as you've done, a lot of it is choices. You got the treatment, but you're also obviously doing the work. You made a choice to rebuild your marriage, to rebuild your body as well. Gosh, I'd like to unpack the marriage, rebuilding the relationship thing. If I don't, I think I'd be remiss for some listeners that might have picked up on that. So often it's the partner, the spouse that goes through that hell, and they go through secondary PTSD, whatever you want to call it, but they're not treated well. Um, are you okay to talk about how you rebuilt that relationship?
Sure.
Thank you.
So during the years leading up to me being fired, I was getting increasingly bizarre, out of control, reckless, talking for hours on end, late for everything. In fact, there was one family trip I completely forgot about. It was 9 hours late
Wow.
to go on the road. And then as people started anonymously putting in complaints about me, you know, I would say to my wife, "You're not with them, are you? Are you one of them? Are you one of my enemies too?" And so I was really treating her, not good. It wasn't terrible abuse or anything like that, but it wasn't good. And so then when I went into depression, I just didn't talk to anybody. I was like totally withdrawn. All I wanted to do was to die. I didn't want to be alive. I had no hope. I never thought I would get better. I had these terrible hallucinations and delusions of my own death, being spied on, put in jail, stabbed to death, dying in a pool of my own blood, gurgling in the blood. That this invisible force would grab me and throw me underneath the wheels of an 18-wheeler truck, ripping me apart. And so, and these are called passive suicidal ideations, where you don't necessarily want to kill yourself, but you want somebody else or something else to kill you and end it. And that's what I have.
Wow.
And that's what I had. And the passive ideations can turn into active, just like that. And then you have an active ideation and you do kill yourself. But so that was hell for 2 years for her. I mean, I was pretty much of a zombie. I mean, I would dive headfirst on the hardwood floors, banging my head, punching myself in the face, yelling at God for ruining my life.
Wow.
I mean, I was just, terrible. And so that was no way to live and exist. So when I finally pulled out of the condition, and we moved to Florida for the sunshine and the warmth, and started rebuilding, I really made an effort to be very calm, considerate, supportive, encouraging to Maggie, my wife. Tried to do things with her and ask, "Hey, what would you like to do? What do you want to do?" And she wanted to join the local gym, so I joined the gym. She wanted to take these exercise classes that were good. They were good for me. And so I said, "Hey, is it okay if I go in the classes too?" And I was the only guy in the class. It was actually a lot of fun. But and so I started doing that. And then, "Hey, would you like to go out for breakfast or out for lunch or dinner? Oh, in the evenings, what do you want to do?" Like, so she really likes watching those cool series like Breaking Bad and The Americans and Homeland and House of Cards. So we, Game of Thrones. So we started watching those. So every night we would watch these. So it was kind of a bonding experience that together. And I would be, very open and honest about the whole bipolar situation and, where I was at and, asking for her help and, advice and that kind of thing. And so, and then we really made an effort in Florida to make a new friend every day. And that could be as simple as just saying, "Hello, how you doing? My name is," and then when you make a friend, it could be that simple. But then being a friend, making developing a lifelong friendship. So we really tried to do that. We call it make a friend, be a friend, or MAF BAF. And so we sort of did that, and we made like a really great network circle of fun friends that has been good. So I mean, those are some of the things. And then I would ask her, "Hey, well, what do you want to do in terms of, do you want to travel? Do you want to go anywhere? Do you want to go on a cruise?" Et cetera. So we sort of started doing more stuff. And so life went from really bleak to a lot happier.
Gosh, it really sounds like communication, summing that up.
Yeah, communication is probably the most important thing.
And the reverse as well. When you're going through that, people that have been through that, people going through that, when you're in that space, you can't communicate, and that lack of communication, the partner or spouse, male or female, is like what's going on, and that lack of knowledge, lack of understanding is just scary, is just so tough to deal with. So, gosh, that was just really interesting hearing how you dealt with that. Your book, Bipolar General, what a great title, My Forever War with Mental Illness. At the start of the show, Greg, I already do the show notes. I narrate them. They've got it on video and audio, so everybody knows about you, where the links are and things. But where's the best place for listeners now, if they're writing down notes, for to to grab your book or to find out more about you?
Hey, I appreciate you bringing up the book. You can get it anywhere books are sold, from your local bookstore to Barnes and Nobles to the Naval Institute Press that published the book to the biggest bookseller in the world, which is Amazon.
Yes.
And I would say that the quickest, easiest way is to go to my website, bipolargeneral.com. And when you go there on the landing page, the three big booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and the Naval Institute Press, are right there. And all you have to do is click on them. They pop up, and you can order the book. I would also say that if people like the book, I would ask that they consider writing a book review and posting it in Amazon, because the more positive 5-star ratings that come on, it elevates and lifts and boosts the book, and more people will read it, which is my goal. Not to sell books, I don't even care about that, because I pretty much have done the whole thing for free. But I just want people to read it so they get the knowledge and the experience and learn from my life, and so they can avoid it themselves, and then they can help their own family, friends, work colleagues, battle buddies, etc.
I could not think of a better reason to promote a thing. This thing in this case being your book. I went to Amazon and I've got the Audible version. It's next on my playlist. But what a clever thing you said there. So listeners, please jump on it and definitely leave that rating. You know, you got these people you got influencers out there in the world begging for attention, but the attention to this book, I think, is critical. Would you please grab the book again, Greg, and talk through the photograph on the cover? It's absolutely brilliant. What's the story behind the photograph?
That was in 2009, when I was the commanding general of Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which is a great big Army base. And they have a military appreciation day every year for the St. Louis Cardinals, the baseball team, pro baseball, and the Kansas City Chiefs, the pro football team, who just won the Super Bowl. But and so that photo was at the start of the game. I was able to go out on the field and salute the flag during the national anthem. So that was actually saluting the flag. And then I got to throw out the first pitch at a St. Louis Cardinals pro baseball game. And it was a good pitch. I had practiced, and I got it right down the middle. It didn't hit the ground. It didn't go over the catcher's head. It was really good. And so the crowd loved it. But that's what that was. And the other thing, there's a really interesting thing. I don't know if you can see it, but whoever took this picture, it's got me facing the right way, and then right behind me is a smaller head facing backwards.
Yes.
And it's actually, I mean, in a way, it almost symbolizes bipolar disorder.
It really does. Gosh, everything about your story and actually, I was very reticent. Thank you to Michael Kachina of the We Fight Monsters podcast for connecting us. Since he connected us, as soon as I started looking into your information, it just captured my attention. The cover of the book, your website, the title alone, absolutely captivating, and I think it'll be life-changing for people out there to learn more. I really, really do. I normally finish the show for 2024. I have a question of what advice would you give to your younger self? But you answered that in a great way when your mum gave you advice, as a younger man. I'm going to ask a different question, specifically for you. And by the way, congratulations, Kansas City. Great to see the loyalty there. My question for you, as a former general, as a United States citizen, really, really strange place for United States now, politically, militarily, immigration-wise. There's a lot of issues going on there. What do you see as the solution? And I ask this because I get so many SF guys. We communicate every day from the States, the state of affairs in the United States. And the show hasn't come out yet, but I think it was Don Mann, a US SEAL Team 6 guy, just very divisive with this media. What do you see as the solution for America, or do you see a path forward for regaining the things that we loved about America. You guys were so wholesome, you were positive, you were leaders. It doesn't seem that way now, Greg. So I know it's not to do with the subject we've been on, but you're a highly intelligent guy. You're well experienced. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as you articulated very, very well, there's a huge divide, tremendous polarization. The different sides, don't hear each other. They don't talk or listen to each other. Listening is probably the biggest thing. They don't see the same sets of facts. Some people will see a situation and it will be blue, and then another group will see it and it's orange. And so there's just no basis for coming together and explaining these things. I think what has to happen is, and it's at every level. It's from the grassroots level up to the highest political levels. I think people need to get over their own individual kind of petty perspective and desires and goals and what they want, and step back and say, hey, there's plenty wrong in the United States. It's never been perfect, but it's pretty good, and our job is to strengthen it, build it up, sustain it. And it's not, it's not the Republican states of America or the Democratic states of America. It's the United States of America. And so people need to come together and talk to each other and listen to one another and understand and show respect for each other's positions. Even if they don't agree, they can say, hey, you know what? I really don't agree with you on that, but I understand where you're coming from. Now, maybe here's some things that we can agree on and we can understand, we can work together on. And I think that if that could start at the grassroots level, and people down at the grassroots, I mean, they don't have to be beholden to these bigger political forces. The bigger political forces have to be beholden to the grassroots, if anything. And then I think as you go up the chain, I think people need to adopt more of a sort of the attitude of the military: service, before self. You're serving a cause greater than self. I think too many of our politicians are in it for a professional career. And so they try to figure out, they triangulate in on who believes what, who can give me the most money, how can I get the most money in my war chest? And then they play to that and they sell that belief or that attitude or that position. And it's very selfish. It's not good for the country, and it's hurting everybody, because I mean, the world, America needs to be strong itself, but the world needs a strong United States to be a leader that other countries can rally around, and for peace and prosperity. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Really good thoughts. I interviewed Matt Thomas, a deputy sheriff, Pinell County in Arizona. His boss, American sheriff, Sheriff Lamb, is realized that he needs to actually get into a position of leadership to make a change. And I think you are so correct there about it's actually down to each individual person. We spoke about the media versus news, and if you just switch off that loudspeaker in your ear, we don't know each other. We've found a bunch of common ground. You and I may have completely different political beliefs, but we're being nice to each other. I think it starts there. It's a very simple humanity thing. You also spoke about the political side. I'm thinking people like Eli Crane, like uh, the other SEAL, Latrell. And those guys are poor as dirt, and they're doing great things rather than building their war chest, as you say. So there is definitely light in the tunnel, but I think you nailed it there, and it's nice to get your perspective on it. I appreciate it. It just comes down to being a good person and being good to others, like you were saying, make a friend, be a friend. I think that's a great idea, and you can't go wrong doing the right thing there.
Right.
Greg, what an amazing show. I could do this all day. I really could. I could dive into so many things there, and you've got so much to give to the world. So again, I want to say thank you for being where you are today. Thank you for being so tenacious at getting better. And your book, I'm so inspired to listen to that. I listen to books now. I don't sit down and read them. So that's my way of learning and adding that in. And I'm absolutely honored to have you on the show. I really appreciate your time, and it's been amazing to speak to you. This is the things you said, and I don't have to blow smoke at all, but the things you said, the most powerful things I've heard from anyone. Personally, I was just stunned at what you brought out. So thank you very much.
Well, it's my pleasure, Damien. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And if you know anybody else who might be interested in my story, please connect me, because I mean, this is what I do. And I will talk with anybody pretty much anywhere, anytime, to help get this story out, because I think it is going to save lives.
I guarantee you it will. We have a conversation here, but I'm thinking on three levels. Gosh, you're probably way above that. But I'm thinking, okay, now how can I translate that? What does that mean? Do I need to dig in for the listeners? And there was so much gold nuggets. That's why I've got all the notes here. So many things there. And I say this in just about every show. If one thing we said can help one person, we've done our job. But there's just so much there that will save lives and highly likely prevent that switch from being flicked that you talked about with BPD, or at least identify where someone's out. So I will absolutely connect you with a bunch of people to share your story more. I got a bunch of ideas already, and we'll talk about that off camera as well. So thank you so much, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all about your story in the book.
Thank you, Damien.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching.